Without further ado, I'll hand over to Paul, who is one of Seismic's co-founders and our CEO. Over to you, Paul.
Olivia, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think it is morning for everyone on the call, but I do see we've got some wonderful familiar faces and new faces to us as well. So it's great to have you on the call. And welcome, Flynn. I think you're in Nairobi, so lovely to have not only we've got Ireland, Nairobi, lots of people in the UK. So yeah, wonderful to have a great breadth of contingent this morning. Very, very warm welcome. This, as Olivia said, this is the first time we've done this as a community. So yeah, the purpose is really to allow us to have a little bit more of a hands-on discussion about a topic which clearly from the survey that we posted before the event is a very important one to us all. You know, for obvious reasons. I've been working in sustainability for 20 years. Most of that has been in carbon. And helping organisations to not only measure but also manage their scope 1, 2 and 3 carbon emissions. And in my 20 years, I've never seen a time quite like this. Clearly, as we all know, the climate science is repeatedly reminding us of the ever-increasing urgency in which we need to act. The horrific events in Ukraine, I think, from a societal perspective are clear and evident to us all. From an environmental one and an energy perspective, you know, this is yet another reason for us to start to drive down our carbon emissions to zero. And thankfully, we're starting to see, dare I say it, the seismic shift to where we collectively need to be. I was up at COP26 in Glasgow in November, and I've never seen anything like it from a UN summit before. It was dominated by corporates, and yeah, I think the skeptics out there called out the greenwashing, and yes, you know, there was a lot of hot air and PR up at COP26, but I also within that saw a lot of authentic and genuine interest from corporates who really feel and see the opportunity and perhaps the responsibility to act on their own behalf and not wait for the regulation, not wait for the member states to actually, you know, create the environment for organisations to have to comply with. You know, the market drivers are now so clear that doing the right thing on an environmental carbon perspective does make good business sense. And as a result of that, we're now seeing the shift that we need to see. So, you know, it's an absolute delight to be for us to be hosting this conversation this morning. Before we dive in, I'd just like to introduce our experts that we've got. First and foremost, Gavin, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Gavin and his team at boxxe have been an absolute delight to work with and have been pioneering, not only in their own right, you know, the work that boxxe does in leading digital transformation for their clients, but also driving their own scope 1, 2 and 3 carbon emissions. You know, growing very fast as an organisation. I'm sure Gavin will tell you more about that. But they're well on their way to embedding great quality carbon transformation in their own right. So I won't give too much away before Gavin shares his learnings and his journey. But thank you, Gavin, for being with us this morning. I'll also introduce Inge. So Inge Hertzog is one of our colleagues at Seismic. Inge's worked with almost 80 companies over the last decade to actively manage, measure, and reduce carbon emissions. She's leading the way for us in the client work that we do in driving net zero strategies for seismic clients, and she's got a passion for making the technical very human and very accessible, and really allow carbon literacy across organisations to go up leaps and bounds. It's also great to have our other colleague, Joe Venables, who will definitely be on hand to answer the very difficult technical questions. Joe is a self-confessed carbon geek. I hope you don't mind me sharing that, Joe. And one of the leading carbon experts in Europe. He likes to do carbon data modelling in his spare time. And what he doesn't know about scope 1, 2 and 3 carbon data may not be worth knowing. So Joe is definitely on hand to answer some of the very tricky questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Inge to allow us to dive in. Inge.
Thank you, Paul. Morning, everybody. Very proud to be part of the Seismic team, helping businesses prosper by becoming a force for good, and really pleased to be here this morning on this fantastic topic, getting started on carbon journeys. As Paul mentioned, my background in carbon accounting in CRC, SECR, ESOS, Article 8, those who know. For those who don't, it's an alphabet soup, meaning all the ways that we are integrating carbon management and now increasingly B Corp and ESG strategy coming together for sustainability goals. So without further ado, I'm going to share with us this morning first the survey results. Thank you for completing those. We'll go through Seismic's tips. I'm going to talk about choosing a level of ambition that's right for your business, setting up for data collection, calculating your carbon footprint, and then the practical next steps. We'll then hear from Gavin McAuley's first-hand experience on getting started with the carbon journey. Then we'll move into a Q&A section towards the end of the call. Let me share these with you. Oh, apologies, 1 second. Thanks for bearing with me. There we go. So we are currently consuming 1.6 Earths worth of resources and waste output, and this is fundamentally unsustainable. The climate science shows that greenhouse gas emissions need to be halved by 2030 and need to reach net zero by 2050 in order to avoid the most dangerous impacts of climate change. This needs to be achieved at a global level in order to stay within those limits of 1.5 degrees. The survey results that you have kindly completed ahead of coming to this call show that we as a collective this morning are motivated to reduce carbon emissions, but need clarity on the next steps. And that's what I hope that this morning's session will give. So of us here today, 42% have measured the carbon footprint for last year. And out of 5, there's a above 4 level of motivation, but lower level of clarity on those next steps. So first of all, choosing a level of ambition. It's really, really useful to start with the end in mind. And what I want to run through is the definition of carbon neutral, carbon negative, and net zero, just so that that foundation is in place. Businesses who choose that they want to be carbon neutral, it means that they are able to continue with business as usual, largely, and then look at removals to negate their emissions. This is not the same as being net zero. Carbon negative is similar. It's business as usual, and then some extra removal. Again, it's not net zero, but it can be a stepping stone on the way towards a net zero status. Net zero itself is something entirely different. It means doing your best to reduce emissions as much as possible, and then using removals to remove the rest. Reduction is key here because every ton CO2 that is emitted does harm. And the Science Based Target Initiative are the gold standard, the most reputable body on this. And they verify both near-term science-based targets and longer-term net zero science-based targets. The near-term targets require a 42% emissions reduction by 2030, where offsets do not play a role. And the long-term net zero science-based targets are the same, 42% reduction by 2030, and then 90% reduction by 2050. And offsets do play a role there. Companies that, once they have hit their net zero target, they will offset 100% of the residual emissions every year after that target date, after the target's been achieved. That's in a nutshell. Because this session is about how to kick off your carbon journey, we're not focusing on net zero today, but please do share any questions in the chat and any interest you may have in perhaps a follow-up net zero specific breakfast briefing we can arrange. So this section was about carbon neutral, carbon negative, net zero, so that you can choose a level of ambition and start with the end in mind as a business. The next section, step 2 perhaps for kicking off your carbon journey, is to set up for data collection. And planning up front sets up for a smooth process and accurate data. In our experience at Seismic, we find there are 4 items that really help in this setup. First, using the greenhouse protocol, understanding it so you know what's coming and what's in store. The second piece is selecting the reporting boundary. So using the greenhouse gas protocol to select the correct, most suitable reporting boundary that defines what's in and out of your organization's responsibility as you define your carbon footprint. This is then applied, and you will want that documented as part of the evidence pack, forming a really nice audit trail for the work you're doing. Third item, really key, is having your greenhouse gas inventory. So this document will specify which emission sources out of the 50 plus that the greenhouse gas protocol recognizes are applicable for your business. And you will want to consider any separate entities, that are within the corporate structure. That needs to be taken into account as well. So once you have interpreted the greenhouse gas protocol, defined the reporting boundary, identified which emission sources are applicable via the greenhouse gas inventory, the last piece that really brings it together is a data map. And here you apply a systems mapping approach that includes the source, the data owner, collection frequency, estimated materiality, and estimated ease of collection, so that you have a matrix that before you set out to begin that carbon journey, you can expect what data is going to come from where and how might it shape up, and plan accordingly. So this was how to set up for data collection for a smooth process and ultimately an accurate and complete data set. Next, we're going to look at the third piece, calculating your carbon footprint. There are 3 key steps to applying a robust, repeatable method that means that you are able as a business to compare your performance year on years, apples with apples, so that your performance is meaningful and progress towards targets can be trusted. Step 1, you want to prepare the raw data, collect the raw data, and then apply assumptions to ensure accuracy. Apply any estimations to ensure completeness, and apply also common sense to ensure that the data is good quality and in a good shape. Once you've collected the data, applied assumptions, estimations, and common sense, next you want to apply the emission factors, and you select the appropriate emission factors from DEFRA, IEA, Climate IQ, and a couple of other sources, but these are the main, most reputable ones. You will multiply the raw data by the emission factor to calculate carbon emissions. So kilowatt hour of electricity multiplied by the correct emissions factor gives you the ton CO2 emitted by that electricity consumption. Then, third piece, sense check the figures. Asking questions of the calculated figures is so important to make sure that everybody is happy, comfortable, confident in those numbers. So, are the figures as expected? Are there any surprises? How do they compare to previous years, perhaps, if you have that data set? Can you explain any trends and anomalies? How do they compare to peers and competitors, if any of that data is available based on some desk research? Really useful to make sure that having the spreadsheet is one thing, but feeling that this is a data set that does accurately and completely represent our carbon footprint is another. And it's really important to have that level of comfort in your data as you set off on this journey. So this was the third piece, how to calculate your carbon emissions from that raw data. Next, I want to look at some practical next steps before we hear from Gavin at boxxe firsthand what the carbon, kind of kicking off that carbon journey has been like for Gavin and team. So practical next steps. First, taking action. So priorities. You want to calculate your scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon footprint for the most recent financial year. If it hasn't been done already, you need to set a baseline year, and if you can, go back a little bit further to be able to establish trends and to negate some of the 2020 pandemic outlier as well. Then, priority 2, develop a net zero target and action plan that covers all scopes. Having a net zero commitment we're seeing across all industries, increasingly becoming a moral, social license to operate. I've mentioned briefly carbon neutral, carbon negative earlier in the call, and for some companies, it is right to use those as a stepping stone on their carbon journey. So again, it's back to that point of considering the right level of ambition for your business, but developing targets and action plans that deliver those is certainly a priority, I think, for all businesses. Pitfalls to avoid: reliance on carbon removals, offsets, so an over-reliance without tackling business as usual and doing your best to reduce emissions as far as possible is something that's becoming increasingly scrutinized and considered as not good enough. It's important to recognize that some carbon removals, offsets, can inflict inadvertent harm in other ways. For example, really fueling demand for monoagriculture, putting vulnerable communities out of their space in order to grow trees and for nature-based solutions. And it's really useful to just be very aware of offsets that are being used. Are they high quality, and what are the other externalities around them? And third pitfall is failing to collaborate with your supply chain, your customers, your internal team as well. Carbon is so much more than just a data and spreadsheet exercise. It's very, very people-centric, and engagement is key. You have to collaborate with so many data holders and also so many stakeholders who have influence to help reduce emissions and change the behaviors and change the way they interact and supply your business, which all contributes to your footprint. And then tips: going beyond net zero by neutralizing en route and tackling historic emissions. A really lovely analogy that was shared with me on this is, imagine if on your way to your local coffee shop, each day you throw the coffee cup into your litter into a park that you walk past on your way home. And imagine that one day you decide, okay, well, that's obviously not on, I'm going to stop this, and you never do it again. And now you feel so achieved. However, all the historic emissions, the historic litter that you've contributed is still there. So a lot of businesses are looking at how they can tackle historic emissions by each time they now pass also removing a piece of litter from the park. And then the second tip, can you go further than reducing impact by also creating positive change? Next, going further, a little bit more on that last point now. So helping customers to win, aligning your commercial strategy and your sustainability strategy, or better still, merging them, is something that is increasingly making sense for a lot of businesses, especially those who are identifying new markets and becoming innovative and disruptive providers of sustainable services and products, or more sustainable services and products. Secondly, inviting stakeholders to celebrate with you. I've mentioned that carbon is not just a data and spreadsheets topic, it's really a people matter as well. So creating value for consumers, for customers, employees, society, and embedding sustainability across the business through engagement. And then driving quantifiable, meaningful change in your industry. So one of the best ways to do this is to commit to a science-based SBTi approved net zero target. It's to report against global standards, including the UN global goals, TCFD, TCND. There's a whole range of acronyms that are industry specific, and it's sometimes useful to just get a bit of advice and pointers on what is applicable to your business and what would actually add value and perhaps integrate nicely with your commercial strategy. We would always recommend at Seismic, when you commit to reporting frameworks, making sure that they make sense for your business and are well embedded and are not a kind of a data collection exercise for the sake of it, but they really are meaningfully contributing value to not just your internal stakeholders, but your external communities as well. And then measuring and continually improving performance. For many companies, this means measuring annually, but sometimes it's appropriate to measure more frequently so that you are able to course correct and monitor and manage consumption, especially in material areas, more closely than you're able to if you measure only annually. Then, finally, quick takeaways from me before we hear from Gavin and then open up for Q&A. First takeaway is really to start with the end in mind. So don't spend a disproportionate amount of effort trying to measure areas that aren't material. And this is something that Joe really champions and has shared a lot with the team internally. Secondly, as I've mentioned a couple of times, carbon really is a people topic as much as it is a data and spreadsheet topic. So engaging your internal team, the supply chain, your data holders are crucial to the success of starting that carbon journey. And there are ways to build those relationships at the outset. And there are ways to sometimes cause a couple of headaches with slightly unclear and long email chains that nobody enjoys being part of. It's really important to consider upfront with that data map, with the greenhouse gas inventory I mentioned earlier, how to make this people process as slick and well planned and effortless as possible, so that those relationships can be built up as a consequence along the way. And actually, that's why we at Seismic love doing this work. We understand this through that people lens, through its B Corp context and how it contributes to a company's wider sustainability strategy, whether that's kind of guided by the B Corp framework or not. And a great example of a company we're working with on their carbon data and how it feeds into their B Corp is boxxe. So I will remove the screen share and invite Gavin to please share with us a little bit more about how you and your team have started your carbon journey.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul, for the nice introduction, and Inge as well. Thanks very much. My name's Gavin McAuley. I'm the Health and Safety Officer at boxxe, but I'm a strategic lead for our ISOs, our standards around 14,001 environment and 45,001 health and safety. But as has been said, we're an aspiring B Corporation that is currently going through the first stages of getting certified and accredited in that. So it's trying to make sure that we're working in the right way. I think, one of the biggest things, just to give you a little bit of a background on boxxe, boxxe is based in York. We're an IT company or a technology company that specializes in providing digital security, modern workplace working, and cloud solutions for our customers. And as part of that is our slogan is around making technology human, which kind of goes very much in line with what you've kind of said, is making carbon human and trying to bring it into the environment. And it's been made for me, it's been made very easy, because working with a CEO, Phil Doy, and our CFO, Hazel, who are really passionate about this sustainability project. So it makes it very easy in a culture that the business wants to work in the right way. So we stepped upon the task of looking at how to capture our carbon, or how to start the data collection. And I think the biggest challenge is not knowing what you don't know. It's like, what are you looking for? What is it you need? And our finance department really love me, I'll be honest. They're where I'm going, I need this, I need that, I need the other thing. And it's very difficult to sort of know what you're looking for. So for me, it was important to kind of set those boundaries, those baselines. So we went about it in a very sort of, what is available to us, how can we capture this information, and try to capture as much of it as we possibly can, going back a number of years, so that we can see the trends and we can see the things, see the information longer term. So we set about it by going to our electric bills, pulling off the data from that, and it's not the easiest task in the world. I have to thank immensely my colleague Sophie, who's our sustainability champion at boxxe, who trawls through the data for us and pulls it together, and makes it really helpful to analyze and break down. So we went about that in a task of sort of just going through our energy usage, our water usage, our waste, any sort of business mileage that we've incurred, where staff are going and traveling, company vehicles, if it's their own vehicles, and trying to capture all that data as much as we possibly can, in a very raw sense, to build it from there. It's not the easiest of tasks. It's not something that sometimes there's data that is estimated. For example, bills are estimated, which was very difficult to analyze. And I think in retrospect now, which I suppose come to at the end, is more, you now know what is easy. So we're trying to work towards what is easier. For example, utilizing smart meters, or utilizing an energy company that's got an online platform, which is easier to pull the data off, as rather than a quarterly or a yearly, more of a monthly basis, to help it make it easier for this data capture. And it's just little things like that we've learned along the way. So estimated bills were a challenge to try and establish. And also when we're in a multi-tenanted building as well, is trying to capture sort of what's our usage of a multi-tenanted element. So the data capture was a real challenge, and pulling that together. It did take a little while to do that, and sort of over a process and trial and error, and how we captured that data. As I say, it was a collaborative piece of work, is working with all the different departments that gather this information, finance being probably the big team that helped us out with the data elements on that. And then we were able to put it into a bit of a spreadsheet, and then work out what was classed as scope 1 for the greenhouse gas emissions protocols, and what scope 2, and then if anything was sitting within scope 3. The next challenge, and this is where I think seismic really helped us out in trying to achieve what we were doing, was the DEFRA conversion factors. I looked online and I looked at it myself, and I didn't really fully understand it, but it, you know, you through some work and reading you can do it. But to speed up the process, we engage with seismic to help us, obviously along with our B Corporation ambitions. We wanted to try and get this done and get our position, one, for obviously to report in our financial reporting, but two, because it's really important to us to get our baseline, to know where we are and where we currently stand, so that we can see what improvements we can make. So we were able to do that, and we were able to really, scope 1 and 2 were probably the easier elements to pull together. Scope 3 was the challenge with working with supply chain. That, you know, a lot of it was a little bit estimated at this stage, because we was still learning and still gathering that intelligence from our suppliers. And it's a real focus for us in the future of how we can really collaboratively work with these partners better, and get better data. And I'll just use one of the examples is we work with a waste management company. They come and take our waste away, and it's really great programs that they run, they organize. They'll collect it, they take away, either it's cardboard and plastics and general waste, and so it's sort of siphoned off and distributed in a different within our facility. But when they take it away, they do some more, and they do this roadmap where they do energy recapture. So anything that they can avoid going to landfill, they will try and recapture it. So one of my plans and going in the future is trying to capture that data, that energy recovery, and what's that impact for us. But yeah, so we were looking at our supply chain as a real important one, and for us going forward. A real interesting sort of element that we came across was our refrigerants. It wasn't something that I understood or knew, and seismic were able to help pull the data and analyze it for us and give us, which was a very much an anomaly for us. Not understanding or not looking into it too much, we were then able to see it in front of us, see what the issues were, and then maybe take some action on it. So for example, we were able to work with our IT department, our professional services team, and straight away we're able to try and utilize our air conditioning for our server rooms in a much more efficient way, so that they're not working as hard and they're not putting so much pressure and things like that on them, which is a really great thing. So just by capturing that data at that first level, was that we were able to take steps before we'd even understood where we were going. And we've done that all along the way. So the questions we were asking ourselves is, what are we doing around packaging? What are we doing around our logistics and the suppliers we utilize? What are we doing around, our facilities, our buildings? We use low water toilets and taps, and we use automatic lights and things like that. So it's trying to incorporate all that sort of information as we were pulling the data in to capture that. So yeah, it's been a great experience. I've really enjoyed it. I think I quite like digging into the data, if that makes sense. It's for me, it's kind of I'm on the road path of we do with our ISOs, and much like we're trying to do with our B Corporation, is this continuous improvement. And it's sort of taking us from where we are. We didn't know where we are. Now we do. We've got the baseline, and we're trying to take the next steps forward as a business, and to show our improvement year on year. And really, our ultimate goal is to be carbon neutral or carbon zero by 2030, and achieving that as a business. I think within scope 1 and 2, we've actively gone about carbon allowances to be carbon neutral in that space. So scope 3 is the next phase to bring on board to that. But yeah, our real ambition, I think, is that continuous improvement. And I'm getting even more granular. So I'm trying to get data like it's on a monthly basis. So each quarter we can do a review or do see where we're tracking and what we're doing. And if there's anything that we can change in that short period of time, that can affect our year. So where we're seeing spikes and where we're seeing activity, so that I think information or knowledge is power at the end of the day for us, and that's one of the big sort of things that I want to achieve going forward, is that we're able to report a little bit quicker and smoother. And yeah, I think that's sort of gives you a bit of a flavour of what we've experienced. It's been great working with Seismic, so thank you to the team.
Thank you so much, Paul, Inge, Gavin, Joe, for sharing your expertise, and to all of you that have joined us today. I hope you found it inspiring and helpful for you and your business. Up next in April on the 21st, we'll have our next session, which is how to use the B Corp impact assessment to improve your sustainability strategy. And then in May, we'll have a session on how to amplify your B Corp message across the business. If you'd like to join those and haven't received an invitation yet, then please do drop me a line. Hopefully you'll have my email. If not, I'll send it in the chat now. And also feel free to share it with any colleagues or peers who you feel would find it valuable. We'd love to have them join us as well. The best way to do that is either bridge them to us via email, and we'd be glad to invite them along, or just simply share the calendar link with them. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And if you have any more questions, yeah, do just let us know. Thank you very much.